Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Humanity Lies Are the Mother of Invention, written by SpartanR259. Humanity, a curiosity at most. They are not notable for much, save their secrecy and protection of their species' history, and an above-average habitability index. Humans like to consider their home classified as a Deathworld, but in truth that is far from the case, other than a 0.1 higher than average gravitational pull. Most of their homeworld could be considered quite comfortable to most galactic species. It is worthy to note that humans are compatible with upwards of 90% of all Federation planets, and that number rises to 98% if marginal and non-invasive preventatives are used. From the molten worlds of Zergus to the frozen tundras of Alta Prime, humans have managed to settle anywhere in Federation space. Humanity has well integrated into both governmental and economic sectors, with relative ease, I might add. There were little to no changes in procedure, nor were there any sudden resolutions proposed by the fledgling species. It appeared to much that the Galactic Federation operated much as humanity had. The ideals of individual liberties and rights enshrined in the foundational documents. It had been truly fascinating to watch the species grow into their own on the galactic stage. A century after introduction to the Federation, a human chairperson had been elected. They led the council for their term and endeared themselves to many. Several other senators tried to amend laws to allow for either longer or extra terms. The human didn't allow for it. To keep greed and power in check, one must come prepared to serve, without self-interest or enrichment. I have been faithful in my service here, but my time has now come to an end. It is time for the next to serve. The end of the transfer speech was rousing, and once again humanity had gained center stage in the galactic community. A decade later, the human senator proposed a series of galactic wargames, pressing into service the grand fleets of dozens of species. Most viewed it as entertainment more than actual presentation of war capability, but every species prided itself in something. The Voltari in their shields, the Geno in their hulls and survivability of the craft, and the Hanan in their beam weapons, and on and on. The humans had developed a beautiful stage for each species to practice in their wargames, using either old hulks or derelicts, or more nimble remote-piloted drones. It was as showy and opulent as one might expect of such things. There hadn't been a war on the galactic stage in 1,000 years, so most fleets had not seen combat at all. The humans went last and were pitied by many. While having sufficiently large ships that certainly looked fearsome, in all facets humanity seemed underdeveloped. Slow and unwieldy, the ships moved about in their formations, putting on a show with point defense rail accelerators. But there were no real capital-class weapons to speak of. Of course, they did have large kinetic accelerators, but turrets had resembled most species of old naval combat boats. In any case, humanity apologized for their meager showing and vowed to be more representative of a galactic power at the next wargame. They wouldn't get that chance. 3 weeks after the wargame, the first intergalactic incursion occurred. A small flotilla appeared near the galactic hub and demanded to speak with the council. A hurried session of the Senate was required, and these newcomers were allowed to speak. They said that they were the representative of the Chul Empire, and that our galaxy was being annexed. We were told to prepare for imperial rule and for species classification. They reveled in the chaos that ensued in the Senate, but it was quickly calmed. The human senator stood unspoken, stating in no uncertain terms that even if all other species were to accept the demands, humanity would fight for the rights of its people and citizens. The Chul representatives laughed at that human. Then you'll die, and your children will be made to serve. You are not the first to resist the Chul, and you will not be the last. I will leave you all to deliberate. You have 3 days to decide your fate. The 1st and 3rd Imperial fleets will arrive at that time and await our report. The Chul sneered. Some of you have high values as nobles and leaders of the Chul Empire. Don't throw away your futures for slaves. And with that, the Chul exited, and the chaos of the Senate resumed. It took a day before two factions had formed in the Senate. Any species that had even the slightest foothold on power wanted to accept, where the weaker economic species feared what may come. By the second day, it was clear that there would be no concessions as the rift became so solid. On the morning of the third day, everything changed. Every human vanished from the worlds and ships operated by the opposition. Aid ships with fortifications were appearing at every world that wanted to try and fight. 2 hours before the scheduled deadline, the human senator stood to take the podium. Today marks an end. Not some glorious moment to commemorate something noteworthy, but a pitiful and shameful display of posturing for power. I do not mourn that which is lost today, for it only brings into stark reality that the bonds we should have shared were not real. There are those among you that may simply be trying to save what little you can, but you will feel the truth of reality in the days to come. Sacrificing someone else to save yourself is natural, but in the end it will only foster distrust and paranoia. The human took several breaths before continuing. So, it is with a heavy heart that I announce that the UEG has been disbanded. We no longer have a place in a body such as this, so humanity also withdraws from this federation. The Imperium of Man has been founded today, and those who seek refuge and safety from those who wish to oppress, I tell you now that you will find open arms and aid if you ask it. The Imperium is a war-bound society. We cannot promise victory or salvation, only resistance. Humanity will never again bend the knee to those who oppress. As of today, humanity offers one last gift to the galaxy that welcomed us so long ago. Our history. Read what you want, but you'll only find blood. We tried to hide away from you who we were, to keep our fear of war in check. We have failed. To those who will soon become our enemies in what is to come, we are sorry. We are sorry that we have taken you at your word, believed everything that you've told us. We are sorry for lying. The human appeared shaken as he continued. We offer that you surrender to us before the consequences of that lie become dire. We will offer this option to you as often as we can, but I fear that what is about to be unleashed no longer has a cage strong enough to contain it. Those who wish to side with us in the coming storm may leave with me, but as of now, this debate is over. The speech later became known as the Lament of Humanity, and very few could have known how galactic power would change in the years to come. Humanity left the Federation with a warning and a threat that if anyone wanted to go after those under the protection of the Imperium, then they lose the option of surrender. No relief would be given, and they would suffer the wrath of humanity. When the fleets of the Chul Empire appeared in the galaxy, they rounded up those who chose to surrender and demanded everything they could find on current human war-making, and they scrutinized the war games of a month prior. It was determined that humanity needed to be made an example of. Both fleets and the detachment of each subjugated race made an FTL jump to the Sol system. Like most races, humanity wasn't locked to their birth world or even their home system, but the home world of a species is of great importance, and it was clear that the Chul were planning to make an example of the human homeworld, Earth. The combined fleets entered the system at its edge, a deliberate maneuver meant to intimidate more than anything else. As such, it took almost a day for the full in-system trip to Earth. On the way, there were several FTL signatures of vessels both entering and leaving the system. The speculation at the time was that humanity was attempting to evacuate as much of the planet as possible. So when the combined fleet arrived, as was greeted by the armada of human ships, surprise on the part of the old Federation allies would have been an understatement. These ships looked just like the ones in the war games, large, blocky things, and not as threatening as they would otherwise appear. A signal went out from the human armada. This is the IMS point of no return. The Sol system is closed, and your presence constitutes an act of war. Surrender, power down, and prepare to be boarded. If you resist, you will be fired upon. I say again, this is the IMS point of no return." The message just kept repeating. It seemed like a joke to the Chul Admiral. "I have had enough of this. Raise that ship in front. A full salvo. I want that ship gone." The bridge crew of the Chul Dreadnought bustled with activity as the order was followed, and moments later every single Chul ship fired on the point of no return. The onlookers could only say the momentary prayer for a crew hoping that their deaths would come swiftly. So when every round, laser, missile, or bomb impacted the ship, it was engulfed in a massive ball of fire. It took a moment for the blinding white of superheated ordnance to fade, but when it did, there she was, the point of no return. It sat in space as if nothing had happened, not even a scratch on the paint. "Hostile actions have been noted. You were warned. All channels, all vectors, weapons free. Let's show these freedom-hating fang faces some democracy." All of a sudden, every ship in the human armada moved, not slow and ungainly like in the war games, but with a speed and maneuverability that could match single-occupant fighters. Ports and vents opened on nearly every surface of the human vessels. Missiles and high-energy lancers of plasma erupted from every ship. The Chul ships seemed completely incapable of defending themselves. Their shields could hold against the conventional weapons of the missiles, but the plasma burned through the shields cleanly before allowing the missiles through. Frigates and destroyers burned and exploded as they took shots intended for flagships. Finally, the Chul fired back, but the reality of the human ships became even clearer. Unlike the energy shielding common amongst most species, humanity had managed the theoretical. Hard shields, falling into its place only a second centimeter from above the ship's hull. These shields could derive power from heat, kinetic energy, and the ship's own power sources. In short, shooting at them made them stronger. So, the only way to bypass them would be to overload the shield emitters with so much power that they would burn out, or, of course, have someone turn them off. As this new reality dawned, the Chul Admiral made his decision. That cost him everything. "Bombard the planet! I don't care if they have to crash into it and detonate your reactors. Make this race regret standing against the Chul!" Destroyers, frigates, battleships, dreadnoughts, and carriers broke from the fight and made a direct course for the planet. The change of fleet behavior was not lost on the humans, of course, and a new message came across the open system channel. "You've had your fun, boys. The cat is out of the bag. Initiate Jericho. Time to delete a problem." All around the planet, massive space stations began to appear, tall along a vertical plane relative to Earth, with a supporting ring section near the bottom of the station. One of the Voltrilli captains on board the observation ships later recounted, "They appeared like ghosts. 1 second there was nothing, and now they were. When these stations came alive and the Chul ships just died. We obviously didn't know it at the time, but humanity had solved 2 theories, cloaking and relativistic mass acceleration. Most mass accelerators could at most deliver marginal payloads at a small fraction of the speed of light. But these stations could accelerate huge 3,000 to 4,000 ton specialized rounds to 90% or better C-value. And to this day, humans have never explained the tech. And when a round nearly as heavy as your own ship hits you at these speeds, most of the time there wasn't even an explosion. The ship just crumpled like a soda can, getting stepped on. The larger ships, though, the carriers and the dreadnoughts, they got caught through, as if you'd taken a giant hole punch and used it on the ship. No shearing of metal. Entire sections of the ship would just disappear. And by the time the last operational Chul flagships was trying to flee into FTL, they were swarmed by boarding craft and taken to task by the humans. But thus far observational craft was silent, and after the Chul were finished, the human fleets turned and made a direct course for them. "This is the IMS point of no return. You have been registered as a support fleet for the Chul Empire. Surrender, power down and prepare for boarding. If you resist, you'll be fired upon." In the most literature today, this event is known as the One-Day War. Of course, this wasn't the end of hostilities between our galaxy and the Chul, but after a while, you would think that the Chul would get the hint and leave our little section of the universe alone. In any case, the galaxy was reorganized under the Imperium of Man, and, for the most part, resembles much of what once was. just that humanity has a little more oversight than the powerful races. Humanity has maintained a neutral stance and even refuses to allow a human to hold the chairperson's seat. They elect a councillor on their own every few years, but they exist in a purely supervisory role and hold no power themselves. It was a decade before another senator was brave enough to ask the question of humanity, "Why were you sorry?" The answer seems to be clear to the humans, but wasn't that clear to the Senate at the time? Humanity, throughout its history, has been at war, but it was at those times when humanity was on the brink, the edge of annihilation, and most often from ourselves. We postured, boasted, and made great every tiny accomplishment, and we took all the boasting to face value. We resolved ourselves to overcome that which we boasted about, to overcome each other. This is how we left our planet for the first time, and it is how we have lived ever since. In short, anything you can do, I can do better. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.